Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
How well defined are your business processes? Are all staff aware of the core processes that result in most of your production? Or are you killing the possibility of growth and expansion? From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Dan Williams is the Asia-Pacific business coach for coaching network EOS Worldwide. He says only about 20% of what your company's doing results in 80% of productivity. So, you'd better get your processes right. Dan starts by explaining to Jeff Waters what he means by weak processes.
I work with a large number of different Australian and New Zealand small businesses, and I can put a lot of their failures and chalk up a lot of their failures to a weak process. And so they may look at, the symptom on the surface, but when you dig, a little deeper, it often goes back to a weak process.
Can you define that for us?
So if you have a production issue or your outcome, what you're producing isn't to a standard and you don't have a QA process, rather than just looking at the widget falling off the end of the production, not at the standard, you should go back to the process and understand, at the root cause, where is the problem? Or if you have people moving through your business and you've got a new person that's sat at their desk for a week and you're thinking, actually, I don't know who that person is or what they're doing. You've probably got a weak onboarding process, and that person, if you hadn't noticed them after a week, they probably have gone. And that type of thing will kill your business if you don't have those strong processes at the core. And then the flow on from there is that's generally systemic through a business. If your core processes aren't strong, then you're going to have all these issues throughout the business. So I really feel like it's one of those things now more than ever that is killing businesses. It's capping their growth, their repeatability and scalability.
What are the implications for recruiting talent?
So in recruiting talent, there's a strong case for the nice things that we see around, the first day desk photo with the new laptop and the T-shirt and the drink bottle and stuff like that. But if that's the extent of the process, then that's going to be a problem. So you really want to make sure that you're giving people that opportunity to be successful and to focus on what they're good at. And that often comes down to having a strong process. You want people to not have to go and tap you on the shoulder every 5 minutes and say, Jeff, what happens next? That distracts you, it distracts them, and it slows their movement through the business and can come back to a weak process.
So establishing this framework, can that lead to fewer people leaving the company?
Yeah, absolutely. I've often spoken about in different forums about how people, when you interview them and you meet someone, there's generally you're sussing out whether they're going to be a good fit for your company. And then before that, there might have been something on their resume that piqued your interest, a talent, some sort of experience. And quite often you'll whip yourselves into a frenzy, excited about the possibilities, and they join the business and they come in and then they realise there's actually no process. And so they're either left creating process or asking you where the process is or making errors because the process is old. And they think, actually, I'm never going to get to apply those talents that you hired me for. And then you might look back 3 months later and think, what was it about Jeff that made me want him to come and work for us? And that romance is gone because they're buried in lack of process and not knowing how to navigate through the organisation.
So what can be done about it in a practical sense?
Really, people are often intimidated by process and saying, we don't have a process for that, or we need a process for that. And you can become sort of overwhelmed by all of the processes that you think you need. But I encourage businesses to really think back and strip back to the core. We call it, in the system that I use as a coach, we call it core processes. So in every business, there is 20% or so that you do that produces 80% of the outcomes. And if you think across your org chart, perhaps department by department, and thought, what is it that they do in the finance department that makes up that 20% that produces 80% of the outcomes? And you went department to department and you just started there. If you captured those 2 to 3 processes, and I'm talking process of 1 page, not procedures, a process, the correct order and sequence in which things need to be done. If you captured them and start really small, you start to feel really good about what's possible.
You know, Mazars has been a long-time supporter of SoundCartel, and now they're helping us bring you this podcast. To find out how Mazars can support your business, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.
Now, you write about a talent gap. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah, so I mentioned the 20% that you do that produces the 80% of the results. So if you go back to that interview and you were excited about the talent that this person had and you wanted them to come in. So if you've got that strong core process, the 20% that's producing 80%, that 80% that they do that produces that last mile, that last 20% is their talent. So that's what you hired them for. So if they come into the business and they're just trying to help you navigate that first 20% and the processes aren't there, you may never see that talent. And they'll never get to close that talent gap. And that's where there's a saying or a quote that if you can systemize the predictable, you can humanize the exceptional. And that's that human element that people love coming to work to do.
So I'm a small business. How do I tell if I've got poor processes?
If you look at the types of issues that you're dealing with in your business, so if you have a look at your management meetings, for instance, and you look at the type of issues that hit your agenda, if you critically analyse them and circle the ones that relate back to a process, and then you start to see a trend over time. And I would say 60 to 70% of issues that are talked about in management meetings are process, and the rest are potentially people. But if you look at the process and you start with the ones at the top of the list that are causing the most pain or hitting that list most frequently, then that's probably in that 20% there, and that's your opportunity.
What are the first steps then that a small business should take once they've isolated their processes and have decided that they're not up to scratch?
The truth is that there is probably a lot of process in the business already, but it's probably not accessible. It's probably not up to date. Sometimes it lives inside someone's head, unfortunately. So I would start small and start with the process that you already have, bring it out, update it, try and shrink it down to one page and start there. Get the momentum, get the flywheel turning, and then take that confidence that you do have some of that work and then go department by department, perhaps quarter at a time, and pick out 1 to 2 processes. By the end of the year, you'll have kind of your way of doing business captured and you'll feel good about it. And when people come into your business, they'll think, actually, there's some maturity here. I can actually get to apply my talents, and that's pretty exciting.
And you're shoring up your business for the future.
Absolutely.
Somebody can take over for you.
Absolutely, and infinitely more scalable, profitable, fun, and if it's on your agenda, saleable as well.
That was Dan Williams, business coach for coaching network EOS Worldwide. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.